is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Nick Ferrari at breakfast.
Good morning to you. It's 3 minutes after 7 on Thursday, the 30th of September, the morning after the afternoon before. You'll hear from Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer as he come away from his party conference and that key speech. He's with us in just a few moments' time. In other news and the most devastating story, Scotland Yard now to face an inquiry as to how former police officer Wayne Couzens was allowed to continue operation. The ridiculous cover story he put up. Sentencing, of course, later today. I've been in this business for more than 4 decades. It even rocked me a little bit as I watched and listened to that last night. We'll have more details on that story. 3 more energy firms go bust amid gas price rise. Don't believe a word of these ludicrous assertions from the government that the petrol queues are getting any shorter. It is utter cobblers if you're around my part of London. In fact, they're getting worse. The Old Kent Road was virtually at a standstill this morning because you couldn't get past the Shell garage, so I've no idea where they're making that up. At its peak, it was supporting 11.6 million jobs. It cost getting on for £69 billion, but today is farewell furlough. How shall we remember it?
Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Call 0345 60 60 973. Text 84850. Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
So as the Labour Party MPs and others and supporters, of course, and canvassers trudge back to their homes, how do we reflect on what they've achieved over the past few days? It's been an interesting one. From scum to services, it has at times been testy, but how does the leader view it all? Let's turn to Sir Keir Starmer, leader of the Labour Party, who joins me now. When things get tough, you find out a lot about yourself as managers or leaders. What did you learn about yourself over the last few days, Sir Keir? Good morning.
Nick, we took some really tough decisions over the last few days, which have really changed our party. We closed the door on anti-Semitism. We made rule changes when we faced the country. Rachel Reeves put out strong fiscal rules, and I was able, for the first time in front of a crowd, to set out my view and my framing. And so we had a really good week, and I'm feeling very, very positive coming out of it. Nick, just before I go on, we did have a good week, but Sarah Everard, you just mentioned
Yes, I want to get you on that, Sir Keir.
Because, I mean, you said, look, in all your time, that somebody, as DPP, Director of Public Prosecution, you see a lot of cases you don't want to see. This one, just so sickening. I think the whole country stopped. And, you know, every thought goes out to that family in these awful, awful situations. It's one of those cases, I think, that absolutely touches the heart of all of us, even hardened people, in a sense, people like me who've prosecuted cases for 5 years and seen some pretty awful cases. This was just awful. And so whilst I was speaking to our party, talking to the country,
yes,
and we had a very good week, there's a bit of me that just is there with the family, just thinking what they were going through yesterday and obviously over the various months that have passed since the awful incident.
Back to Brighton in a moment. Just to finish that up, does there need to be a review of the Met and other police forces? And later in the show, Sir Keir, I'm going to detail that there do appear to have been opportunities where this man could, and many would argue should have been caught. Keir Starmer?
Yeah, I think that, Nick, that is the key issue, which is how did he slip through the net? Because there were obviously warning signs. So how did he get through the net? I know that, thousands upon thousands of police officers doing a fantastic job up and down the country are absolutely sickened by this. But obviously it's got how on earth did he get through the net is the critical question that has now just got to be answered.
To events in Brighton and your speech yesterday, you talked of a good society. What does that actually mean? And isn't it surely just the same as one of David Cameron's ideas, just with a different name?
No, it's not, Nick. It's what I was setting out yesterday was what I think the good society is based on my own upbringing, my own values, which is a society that educates each of our children to a position where they leave school with the skills they need for work and life. It's astonishing that isn't happening. Where they have a good job to go to that is high paid, high skilled and near where they live. I was really struck in Blackpool earlier this year. I was up there for 3 days, 16 and 17-year-olds, and I said to them, how proud of you of Blackpool? They said, we love Blackpool, it's where we come from. I said, how many of you think you're going to have to leave Blackpool in order to get the job you want? All of them put their hands up. So and then on to care and security, which is, of course, security of having a decent place you can actually afford to live in, and security in the sense of feeling you can go out and about without antisocial behaviour. In Stoke just a few weeks ago, I was with, again, some young people, and young girls, in fact, and they said that they didn't feel they could go into their high street on their own. So, Nick, my vision of the good society is grounded on what I think that matters most to working families, and that's because I come from a working family. I know what's talked about around the kitchen table.
You do, and we've spoken about that before. And on the subject of work and those perhaps at the lower end of the pay scale, what should be the minimum wage, Sir Keir?
Well, on Saturday, Nick, we set out that it should be immediately £10, which is a 12% increase and roughly about £2,000 a year more than those on the minimum wage get now. And so that's a significant step in the right direction. It's a minimum for now. It should be immediate, but, it would make a big difference to those on the minimum wage. And believe you me, I have close relatives working in the care sector. I know what it means to live on the minimum wage. I know how desperately they need a Labour government to change things.
But 2 years ago, you were photographed at McDonald's in Wandsworth supporting the idea of a £15 minimum wage in a McStrike. So you've gone backwards with the amount.
Well, no, Nick. I mean, look, lots of people will campaign for more than £10. Of course they will. That's happening across the labour and trade union movement. The McDonald's dispute that was going on was a particular dispute. The question we've been answering this week is not whether we support this campaign or that campaign. The question we've been answering is, if we were in government with the economy as it is, what is the right approach, taking the economy as a whole?
But why did you support £15 2 years ago, Sir Keir?
Well, Nick, all of us in the Labour movement support more money going to those on low wages. I and Rachel Reeves now have, what we've been doing this week is getting our own house in order with the rule changes we're making and setting out our case to be an alternative government.
Is that picture a bit embarrassing? We'll move on. Is that picture a bit embarrassing now? With hindsight, do you wish you hadn't gone to the McStrike?
No, I don't. But what I now have to do is to face the country and say, look at the economy as a whole, and what are our priorities? Where do we put the money we've got? And I think a £10 minimum wage for now, immediately. Of course, we'd want to go up from there over time. Is what we can do within the economy as it now is. But we have one of the things that's very important from this conference is that we come out arguing for the good society, the things I've described, but also a strong economy that we can run with credibility. And that's why Rachel Reeves set out fiscal rules about how we will behave as a government years before the election.
You seemed ready for the bit of heckling that you endured. Had those lines been prepared, Sir Keir?
Well, some of them had and some of them hadn't. Some of them were gifted to me by the hecklers, I'm afraid. Some of them, I had anticipated there may be some people in the audience who weren't happy, but they, as you will have seen, the vast majority of the conference hall were with me,
yes.
And in fact, they policed the hecklers. But it was the line that I used, the one I think was probably the most powerful, was saying, chanting slogans or changing lives. And they're the choices for the Labour Party. We changed this week to change lives, and we're leaving behind the chanting of slogans that get you nowhere.
One that I don't think you responded to was, where's Peter Mandelson? Did Lord Mandelson have involvement in this?
Nick, I wish I'd been quicker-witted on that. I should have said "in your head" to whoever was heckling.
So Lord Mandelson is not involved in any way in the formation.
No,
of this
he's got no formal role at all. And I personally haven't spoken to Peter for some time. But look, I'm not going to pretend I don't take. I have all sorts of conversations with people. I'm very happy to do so. So I'm not pretending there aren't people I don't talk to.
You know better than anyone. It's not just the hall in Brighton you've got to win over. It's the country you've got to win over.
Yep.
How helpful is it that effectively your second in command describes people who vote Conservative or support Conservatives as scum? Why should scum vote Labour?
Well, Nick, they're not words I would use. I've never used the word scum, and I don't think...
Your 2IC did, second in command did.
Yeah, Angela's got a different approach to me, but I didn't. What I did in my speech was to describe the Prime Minister as a showman.
Yes. But I'm a Conservative living in Redcar. I'm a Conservative living in Redcar, and your deputy thinks I'm scum.
No, I think, Nick, she was describing Conservative ministers rather than Conservative voters. But look, I'm not going to get into the ins and outs of it. I wouldn't have used that language. I've been very clear about that. That's not the language I would use. characterised the Prime Minister as a trickster and as a showman, and set out why I thought that.
You understandably went after the government over much of its handling of the pandemic, the impact on jobs, the impact on the NHS. Why didn't you oppose it at the time?
Well, Nick, because the big chunky questions over the last 18 months have been things like, should we have restrictions in place? Should we have furlough? Now, you can argue uphill and down dale with the government about exactly what they did, but on those chunky issues, I thought we did need restrictions at times, and I did think we needed furlough. So, of course, in those circumstances,
but it's easy to oppose it now, isn't
the government.
Sir Keir? It's easy to oppose it 18 months on.
Well, Nick, that's not entirely fair. In the autumn of last year, I came out and said the science tells us we should go into restrictions. The science tells us that we're not going to be able to mingle at Christmas. I was criticised widely for that. People said, opportunist, you're trying to cancel Christmas, only for the Prime Minister to have to follow suit. So the idea I wasn't out there where I thought they were wrong isn't quite right. But on the other hand, where I thought it was right to have restrictions and put furlough in place, we voted with the government. And I'm not going to, I think in a situation like a pandemic, there's a little bit of growing up and making sure that you support where you need to, challenge where it's appropriate to do so.
Last couple of minutes together, you pointed out accurate that when the Prime Minister as a columnist was writing about traffic cones, you were the Director of Public Prosecutions, you were getting things done. However, during your tenure, there was a fall in rape prosecutions that you now say is unacceptable, and the Rochdale sex abuse scandal was in part down to the slowness of the Crown Prosecution Service. You weren't getting things done there, were you?
Well, Nick, actually, if you look at the overall rape conviction rate, it went up, and we put a lot of work into that. As for Rochdale, Nick, I hope this demonstrates the sort of person I am. It wasn't that they were slow in Rochdale. When we finally prosecuted in Rochdale, I realised we hadn't prosecuted earlier on in relation to the same man. And so I said, well, how are we prosecuting now and we didn't before? I looked at the file myself, and what I found was that the reason we hadn't prosecuted is because assumptions were being made about the young women who had been groomed, that they were themselves abusing drink and drugs, that they'd gone back to their abusers, and therefore they weren't credible. I found that profoundly wrong, and I reset the criminal justice system. So where I found there was an error, I tried to, this is the kind of person I'm, practically do something about it, and we did.
And lastly, noting events of the weekend and the team you follow so passionately, and what seems to be the uptick in your fortunes, are you the Mikel Arteta of British politics? Sir Keir Starmer.
Well, I don't know about that, Nick. But what a result.
Now, are we talking Brighton or are we talking Arsenal-Tottenham here?
We're talking both. On Sunday, I got all of... listen, I mean, for 3 days, I was, getting criticism after criticism. Why are you bringing these rule changes? Why are you taking this risk? I knew we had to change our party and we got it over the line. At the same time, Arsenal are thrashing Tottenham 3-1. I'll put that down as a good day.
And I will refer to you as Mikel only at the end of this interview. Thanks for your time. Sir Keir Starmer here on LBC. News headlines a little bit late, 7:16. Simon Conway.
The Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has told LBC the Met Police must answer the question of how Sarah Everard's murderer, a serving officer at the time, slipped through the net. As the furlough programme enters its final day, there's uncertainty for almost 1 million workers still thought to be receiving support. Dominic Raab has suggested addressing the HGV driver shortage by using offenders who've been given community sentences. The weather, wet and windy for many with outbreaks of heavy rain, a high of 8